So ladies, gentlemen, doomies out there, I just got back from binge watching the final 6 episodes of Doom Patrol Season 4 Part 2, and I just saw their ending. That ending, and we're gonna get into it, but not quite now, because I'm really not ready to get into that and revisit that trauma I just went through. This video is probably gonna be quite an unorganized mess, because I've got a ton to discuss. I do really apologize that this is so late and I didn't do individual episode breakdowns, but I'm here to blabber about everything. I hope you guys are ready to ramble about what you thought of it down in the comments below. So let's get into the final episodes in general, what I thought about them, how things ended for the characters, and just how things ended in general for Season 4, Part 2 of Doom Patrol. And man, every time I just think about it, I feel both happy but incredibly melancholy. First of all, I just want to say, I after having just watched it, and it is all kind of blurring into one, because I literally just sat there for a 6-episode binge, I am very happy with the way things ended off and just how things panned out in these final 6 episodes. Of course, right away, as of episode 7, we pick up where we left off in Orquith, and this episode just dealt with the immediate ramp up to Wally Sage and the followers of Immortus gaining the Doom Patrol's final dose of longevity. Thanks to Cliff, good old Cliff Steele, basically giving it up to them thanks to the offer that Wally promised him from Immortus, and how he could watch Rory grow up in good health and that he won't decline any further.
You fucking moron!
And episode 7, Orquith Patrol, just in general, I found hilarious, thanks to mainly, well, I mean, everyone makes me laugh, and it would be impossible to point out every little moment in this episode and every episode after this, but my favorite moments of this episode were definitely between Rita and Rouge. Just managing to escape through shapeshifting into a suitcase, the joking about Rita's previous killings, and laughing at how she actually is kind of a serial killer if you think about it.
Yes, you are. You're a fucking serial killer.
And then, of course, arriving last minute to the rescue with a bunch of drinks.
Someone order a rescue?
Very, very Rita Farr and Rouge right there. But I just really do like how things unfolded between both characters. I mean, it's been quite a journey for both of them, but in the back half, they're more or less on the same page here. And it was just really nice to see this change up in their dynamic, especially where things got in the final episodes with what I'd call Rouge's almost codependence on Rita, if you will, to hold her accountable and not slip back into that life that she more or less hates herself for. So Rouge, I mean, this show, I've always said it's been, I mean, my favorite things have been the dynamics, like Larry and Rita. Amazing. Cliff and Jane, but it interchanges here and there. But when Madame Rouge joined the season, it's been a bit of a rocky road for both of them. But as usual, Doom Patrol managed to balance this comedy, sometimes a drama between team members, especially given the history of Rouge and Rita, but also finally ending it and this final arc for both of them on a very, very sentimental run.
You are part of the Doom Patrol now.
We also had some more development for Vic in these early parts, bonding more with Derek, and Derek was getting a taste of what it was kind of like to live this superhero life in Orquith, and wondering just why Vic would ever give that up. But Derek represents all of the feelings of what Vic's friends likely had this whole time, and how they felt like he just left them for this glamorous superhero life. But the thing is, in all reality, Vic feels like he's lost so much because of it. He, as he said in the episodes, couldn't really even look at himself in the mirror, so how could he have possibly faced his friends with this new version of himself back then when he hadn't even figured things out? So it's been a very, very big ride for Cyborg amongst all of these seasons, and I mean, needless to say, every single Doom Patrol character, but it was really nice during Season 4 to see Vic kind of touch base, go back home, connect with his friends, and after all this and Derek just heading back to his family, this paved a way forward for Vic to become a transformed and accepted version of himself, and not going back to being the old Cyborg, but a new one, which was something I don't know if I actually expected when it comes to Vic actually going back into the cyborg tech. But just as with a lot of the wrapping up storylines of Doom Patrol in this whole series finale, or as we get to the series finale, it's all about this full circle trip for all of the characters. Some ending, I mean, I was about to say more happy than others. I feel like they're all happy. I guess I'm projecting with how sad I am over a couple of them. Also, as I basically started off this video by saying, really happy, but melancholy at the same time. Now, I would say Vic's future looks very, very bright for him. And this also reminds me, you know, with what this character's been through, it's not just his journey as Cyborg, even though this is all entwined into one. We also had the journey with Silas Stone throughout the years, and it was nice to see some brilliant scenes with him and his dad there at Star Labs. And I'm pretty sure these were the final scenes that we saw with Vic and Silas in the whole show, so I'm very glad that they made some time for that. And just seeing the growth between both characters across the seasons, both father and son getting to this place and where he's helping guide his son into making the decision to be a hero on his own terms, it was great. And it was great to get Cyborg back with some upgrades as well. Some I didn't necessarily expect, like actually having a little freaking orb within the time stream. I don't know where Vic keeps that, but my god.
Great, deploy the power.
So by the end of Awkwith Patrol, this is when we get the reveal for Immortus. And as Rita said,
Fucking feathers.
I know, right? Like, what? I mean, I have to say, I do dig it. It caught me off guard, and it's something that just seems so typically inconsequential for Doom Patrol back then when Rouge arrived. And what I mean by that is just Isabel falling through the crack into the time stream, for her only then to come back as arguably an absolutely huge threat in the back half of this season. So no, it is not General Immortus from the source material, and I think really only one of the things those two characters have in common would be how they've both lived for thousands of years, of which we had revealed in episodes 8 Fame Patrol, when we had Isabel Feathers appear on the World of What show, in where she just gets taken over by her rage side self and talks about having witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, stared into the heat death of the universe, and heard the answer to the final question. And as you can tell, things were getting pretty trippy at this point. And as I said, I digged it because it wasn't something I expected. And as a result, with Isabel Feathers being Immortus, I just never knew what to expect next. And I think that's where Doom Patrol really finds its stride in things, its strength. It's when the most weird shit happens and it can turn into the even bigger weird shit, and everyone's just along for the ride and just looking to see what the heck could happen next to the characters. So when Doom Patrol relishes in that complete bizarre anarchy of, you know, subverted expectations for the main villain to all the weird stuff that came with Isabel Feathers as Immortus, I really enjoyed that. Sure, I would have liked General Immortus, but this was still something I was, you know, chuckling back laughing each and every episode. And the more you break it down here with what was the actual thread with Isabel Immortus, shall I say, other than just wanting to be the center of attention, such as when the Doom Patrol got their very own day dedicated to them, on top of being driven around a parade, which I frickin' love, with Rita getting her very own little blob balloon, which can I get one of those? I don't know how much it will cost, but maybe there's a miniature version I can have in the background of this video.
What the fuck is that supposed to be?
And sure, if Isabel Immortus didn't get the attention, then yeah, maybe things could get pretty dangerous. But most of the time, she just reversed time and wanted to be noticed, of which we had a bit of that backstory explored when she hosted her very own play at the Cloverton Playhouse. And if there's one person who can relate to that craving for attention, well, of course, that's Rita Farr, which was kind of fitting as well, as like she really couldn't stand Isabel Feathers. So if anything, Immortus had her very own journey of growth to go on as well. But it's a threat that I think can be forgiven a little bit, in which they do realize, given that after all, Isabel spending eons in the time stream and witnessing the rise and fall of civilizations is somewhat a little bit the Doom Patrol's fault, and Isabel's antics can, as a result, be not completely excused this season, but you know what I mean. Even Rita was talking among those lines, and maybe that was to do with her old age, and she, as you said, maybe we should just go out with a bit of class or dignity. But yeah, I have to say, I enjoyed what came with Isabel Feather's villainous ways, if you want to say villainous, such as episode 9's Immortus Patrol, which I found absolutely fantastic. And I say that, seriously, as a person who isn't really a musical guy. Like, I don't hate them, I don't love them. But this episode here, I don't think there's anything that I actually never knew that I wanted more than to see members of the Doom Patrol act the way they did in this episode. Especially with how funny it was with the sex ghost just popping up every now and again. Cliff trying to have a good time, my god. There's that, and then there's like the Rouge and Rita best friends song that was playing, and that's when Rouge started to kind of cotton on to what was going on with Immortus Patrol. And sure, there was the threat of the butts, but that didn't really come into play nearly as much as what I thought that it was going to in the back half. But given that I guess the idea was to avert the butt-pocalypse, it makes sense that before the end, we only really see the mini ramp up to that, with the butt known as Theodore rallying all of the other butts in retaliation against the way mankind has treated them, to then of course Nicholas and his partner, well, I think it was his partner, Margaret Yu, trying to go against that, and also she turned into a butt herself, so I guess they're gonna live happily ever after, cheek to cheek, if you know what I mean? As of the end of part 1 as well, another major aspect to the final episodes, of course, is with the Doom Patrol losing their longevity means that they are rapidly aging. And this causes all kinds of issues, such as Jane getting stuck in her head, concerned that she's getting dementia, still struggling to figure out what these puzzle pieces mean. And this is where Casey Brink returns and tries to help Jane after losing her father and her creator too, Wally Sage. I like how Casey just had to absorb all of this on top of the idea of absorbing that, hey, I'm actually real, and then going on her own journey from there. It was also, on top of Casey returning, really nice to see Dorothy come back. I thought after when we first got introduced to Casey and they rode off, sure, we might have seen Casey again, but I didn't necessarily expect to see Dorothy a whole bunch, but she was still in it way more than what I thought she would have been. Although at the same time, I did feel like when we saw Casey and Dorothy, when they were in it, and then at other times, maybe it's just my memory because it's all blurring into one, but I felt like they just went missing. Like, I was like, wait, where did Dorothy go? But I guess it's because we had to tackle all of this other stuff, and then before you know it, it's just like, where's Casey? Oh, it just turns out that Casey was wandering around Doom Manor. But either way, I'm still very thankful for seeing Dorothy again on top of the Casey stuff here, especially as she played quite an important role for another character in the final episode with regards to Jane, but a little bit more on that towards the end. And then of course, good old Larry Trainor. There's a big concern there with Mr. 104 destabilizing day by day. So for some time, it looked like their love was destined to fail. And Mr. 104 at this point has this idea of going into the sea and turning himself into a block of lead. I know that's like really tragic, but I also find it just funny. I mean, I guess he's conscious the whole time he's a block of lead? I don't know. And this is what I mean by funny. It's just Larry, the stuff Larry's involved in. I burst out laughing when Larry had the idea of digging himself a grave, so then Keeg can survive in the orchids, and at least that way they'll be together. It's such a Larry thing. Just imagining him there with Keeg just chilling in the orchids, and that's Larry's coping mechanism for the way things could end eventually.
Why are you digging a giant hole in the ground?
And as for Rita's growth in the final episodes, I do find that to be quite something. It seems that growing older is quite fitting for Rita. Over the episodes, overcoming the feeling of being a monster, she slowly but surely, somewhat unofficially slips back into the team leader role again, offering words of wisdom to the team. And in her old age, it was just so sweet seeing her reveal how much she loves the Doom Patrol. And we all know that they love each other. Some more openly since sentimental than others, but this was something a little bit deeper. When she was saying how grateful she is for each and every one of them to Larry, even if it hadn't seemed like it in the past, being team leader wasn't an ego trip for her. She just wanted to hold the family together, which is why she was so salty when Madame Rouge took over. Also, of course, there's just Rita being an old lady, and that being funny in of itself, just blobbing out as she finds it easier on her arthritis. Eventually, it just gets to a very Doom Patrol-y point in where they realize that Isabel has this growth on her back. That's what I mean about Doom Patrol, which, as it turns out, after being trapped for millennia in the time stream, she got more powerful, and that's what manifested into this, I think as Cliff called it, this massive skin tag. So in some explainable way, it somehow came off her body, it then fell through time and landed in the past, which eventually found its way into the hands of Niles Caulder, of whom, as we know, shaved parts off of this, which then ended up giving each Doom Patrol member their longevity. Of which I have to say, when all of the Doom Patrol got sent into the time stream by Isabel and discovered, thanks to Keeg, that there's some longevity on the other side of these portals that he found, it was so good to see Timothy frickin' Dalton back as Niles Caulder. And I really do mean this. I didn't necessarily expect to see that happen after he initially somewhat returned and then got eaten by the Doom Patrol. For them to get him back in those final episodes in way more scenes than I actually would have ever have thought, even if I heard this leaked, I would have thought it would have just been one scene. I felt very spoiled with the fact that each member of the Doom Patrol, for the most part, got a scene with him, because despite their very complicated relationship with the Chief, that's the thing I love about Timothy Dalton's casting. The Chief isn't really... I mean, I shouldn't need to explain it after what he did to the Doom Patrol with all of their origins, but there's something inherently warming about Niles, and you did get little tastes of that at different points in time when the Doom Patrol were trying to, get the Immortus necklace off of him. So this saw Rouge go back to the ant farm in 1949, where Niles was actually looking into that piece of Immortus, and she then confronted her past self. And you got some great scenes here, because in this moment you really get some insight into how much Rouge just resents that part of herself. And Michelle Gomez is just absolutely fantastic. She's gold. I don't know what more I can really say there, other than I just feel like she's been such a fantastic addition to this show. And obviously a big part of the part 2 of Doom Patrol is that they somewhat knew where the future was going to go, and can they maybe go away from that, especially with Rouge in the future seemingly having run away. Is she going to go into self-preservation mode, or is she going to stick by her somewhat newfound family? I have to admit, though, I was thinking, why couldn't Rouge remember meeting her future self in the past with regards to the time loop? Maybe that many smacks to her head with the weapon stamp is what gave her some memory loss. I don't know. As for Larry and Jane, they got sent back to Doom Manor in 1996, and I thought it was a really awesome idea, and once again, something I didn't ever really expect to see, and that is Larry to get to have some form of, I don't know if you want to call it closure, as this is the old version of the negative spirit that hadn't quite left Larry yet, but to see him have a conversation with the negative spirit is just something, once again, didn't expect, but I found really, really awesome. This is when the negative spirit teased this new life for Larry, and Larry took that as becoming a son, and again, more on that in a little bit, because I was kind of confused about that, and I saw that some other people were as well. And then, of course, with Vic, he got a glimpse at his future, and where, after not being sure of what path he would be on, it was comforting to know that he had a place that was rooted back into what he used to love doing, teaching robotics, all while being this, accepted cyborg version of himself as well. And I like to think that, on top of teaching, in the school term holidays, he could be probably fighting with the Justice League and doing heroics that way. And as for Cliff, he ends up in Paraguay in 1948, where Niles had just got that piece of Immortus. And this all ends up in Cliff being the one to break Niles Caulder's back in how he loses the use of his legs. Which, having Cliff be the reason as to why this happened to Niles is a bit of odd poetic justice, just considering the relationship between them both. And I mean, after all, what Niles had done to Cliff with his accident that even made him Robot Man in the first place, that it's just borderline, as per how Cliff kind of feels, unforgivable. So that was something. And I have to admit, I was wondering, what was the reason Niles thought that he lost the use of his legs if he took that somewhat Kipling potion to forget? So that's something to consider. A lot of people, what I've seen out there after this, because I was floating around seeing what people were thinking, and people were wondering, did Kipling actually make him lose his memory? Because after all, Kipling was pretty wasted. And if not, then maybe Niles' attitude towards Cliff after all of this time, you know, with their back and forth throughout the first few seasons, there was always that energy between them, and there's always that thing in our heads where it's just like, wait, did Niles actually remember this whole time? And I'm not saying that is the case, by the way. If anything, it's just crazy speculation and theorizing there. But there is another case in where this point can be made as to whether Niles actually did choose to forget or not. And this is, of course, with Jane. So, first of all, I thought it was also really poetic that after all of this time, and also the unique relationship that Jane and Niles had, that he was still the one for Jane in yet another session between them both that could help her unlock what she needed to in order to take that next step of growth in her story. And this is really sentimental to these two characters. Again, I know there was the whole reveal at the end of season 1, but there's certain characters who, despite after learning what Niles did, there was still that, you know, there was not only that wounds there, but that sentimentality for the Chief. And Jane most certainly had that for Niles after all of their sessions together in the interview room. So we learned the thing that she's been needing to say is what her father did to Kay Chalice. Also, what happened to her, to all of them. The moment they were all created, as Jane said, they could feel the memory. So Jane admitting what had happened to her with all of the personalities stood before them was a very final page turn for development of the Kay Chalice storyline. In this moment, we see that Jane puts the puzzle pieces together, and this is where the underground begins to crumble as it's no longer needed, as they're all together now, and they all go into what Kay has been building, and where the train's background turns into that very kaleidoscope-looking imagery, and that's where Jane says, I am the kaleidoscope. So Jane is still there. It's just she's all of them at the same time, which was also really awesome in how you can use all of the personalities' powers without her, for example, having to get Hammerhead to take over as the primary. Like, everyone is technically the primary, and I thought that was a really awesome evolution for Jane. But going back to the whole memory potion thing with regards to Niles, this is when Jane gets sucked back into the portal, and I was thinking, did Niles actually drink to forget here? Because the camera lingers on it. He kind of grabs the drink, and you don't see him sip it. Now, again, I might be reaching here, but does he forget, or does he deliberately not drink so that he can remember, knowing in this kind of sweet way underneath the whole time throughout the previous seasons that not only will he help Jane, but that she will be okay the entire time. There's just something, you know, if you were to rewatch Doom Patrol, if this does turn out to be true, and I have no idea if it is true, that is pretty cool knowing that if you saw those scenes again, that Niles basically knows that she's going to be absolutely fine. And then, of course, in the finale, it was all about wrapping things up. Well, I mean, it kind of picked up with Isabel Immortus floating like a bloody vampire, and that kind of caught me off guard. I was like, well, what the hell is going on? But it didn't stop there, because then, of course, we had the Butts come in, and they all start singing thanks to Nicholas, which distracted the Butt apocalypse from taking place. So at the very least, what I can say here is that things got very wacky for then only Isabel to get jealous of the Butts singing because she wants it all to be about her and her show. So then she starts singing, and at this point I was right along with Larry when he said,
What the hell?
Only the Doom Patrol finale could mash up all kinds of bizarre wackiness with a season-long thread in this kind of way. I honestly didn't know what was going to happen next. Now, when I first saw this resolve, I was pretty confused initially with how it all wrapped up, with how the Doom Patrol snuck out, and then the Playhouse just got engulfed in this mystical energy, and it just disappeared. I was like, what happened? You know, the Doom Patrol and Larry and everyone were acting like they did something, and I was like, but you guys didn't do anything. Maybe that's the whole point in the joke here, because they're like, yeah, we sorted it out, but I was You guys didn't do anything. It just disappeared. Like, am I missing something? So the most likely case, obviously, is that Isabel did this herself with her power flaring up the way it was. Plus, as she just enjoyed the singing so much, and as what we learned, they went on a 1,000-year successful run of performing, as we found out in just a couple of scenes after this. So I guess Isabel Immortus got the attention that she craved. Again, a little bit of a weird final threat. I suppose she could have gone nuclear at any point, but the idea is that she just wanted to go on a tour with Butts for 1,000 years, and if they had just figured that out sooner, then this would have all been over. But who could have ever figured out that would be the solution to a season-long thread? Only Doom Patrol could have such a very specific antagonist solution. So after all of this is where you could tell that things were, for sure coming to a close for the entire series of Doom Patrol, because the Doom Patrol were gathered around having a nice family dinner together, with Rita going away to get dressed into her old uniform. This is where Immortus arrives to give them frickin' toenails to restore their youth. And so this is when Rouge goes to bring Rita her toenail. I didn't think I'd be finding myself saying that anytime soon. Well, this is when we hear Madame Rouge scream. And this absolutely broke my heart. And I know I keep saying this in this breakdown here, but I didn't expect this. I really didn't. Even as of when it happened, I didn't quite believe it. I was like, oh no. As soon as they started going on about, okay, we're gonna go to the afterlife, I thought, oh okay, we're just gonna go get Rita back. But no, when Rita appeared in ghost mode to Larry, you just knew. So this is where it started to settle in for me, and especially when Larry was running around trying to find what would, anchor Rita to the mortal plane, and that being alcohol, of course. This is where my heart really started to break. Given just how these two have been such a pair, and how he could tell that she wasn't coming back, and he didn't want her to leave him, and she always saw him as not broken, the only person who ever saw him like he wasn't even broken at all. All of the freaking memories, kind of like the Cliff flashback or flash forward at the end. It was like all of Doom Patrol and Larry and Rita moments were just storming my brain, and I was, let's just say I started to ugly cry. I mean it. Like, I didn't know if I was going to tear up for Doom Patrol. I mean, I knew I'd tear up, but I didn't expect, and okay, maybe a tear going down the face, but it was multiple tears. If you've been watching the show this long, I don't know how you couldn't have a similar emotional response to me. I mean, fair enough if you don't ever get emotional over things, but oh man, it just crushed me. It really, really, really did. And then when she said to him, there is always more love out there, always, especially for you. Oh man, I don't know if I want to talk about this much longer, because this is the melancholy feeling kicking in, guys. So this is when we get that last team meeting from Rita, and she says that she's ready to rest now, and the Doom Patrol disband after Rita succeeded in her mission into leading them all into the first step of the rest of their lives, which again, all of this was so sweetly written, and how Rita realized that was her goal, and now she's ready to rest as a result of it. The funeral part, though, so like, I'm getting, again, with Doom Patrol here, you're getting all like in the feels, incredibly so. And then you get the funeral, and where, of course, in a very hilarious Doom Patrol way, with the burning of Rita Farr's body turning into a freaking huge balloon. So this is when Rouge needed to pop it, and it just let out this terrible, terrible smell. But that's when, once again, you get those final words from Rita, and where just before she faded away after Jane says sorry about laughing at the smell, Rita responds by saying,
It's totally fine.
and of course, when reading into that, you can just take that as Rita's final words being like, despite, we're disbanding, and it's almost terrifying because we've never really done that before, it's all going to be okay. So now we're at this final part in the finale. I have to say, I was really happy with obviously how all of this was very full circle. I mean, after all, look at where we're at with the characters. Jane, or should I say Kay, and the Underground are all one and more or less ready to start this new adventure. And she does, with Casey, of whom has been very much so looking forward to a new adventure of her own, very fittingly in a spaceship. And that's when Jane, or Kay, the kaleidoscope, goes along as well. And I have to admit, though, I mean, I do like Casey and Jane together, but I felt like things unless I'm misremembering, were things very shut off with the fog or Shelley Byron? I guess her role was more or less to kind of help guide or like push Jane along on her journey to becoming or being where she was in the finale. But I thought that was going to be the end game, but it is also nice and fitting with how Casey and now both Kay or the Kaleidoscope are at this point of truly, as Rita said, being on the first step of the rest of their lives. So maybe this is the more fitting pairing. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Did you expect it to go back to Shelley Byron, the fog? Or are you absolutely like, no, that's fine. Shelley was just a part of Jane's journey, but Casey is, I guess, the end game. Larry goes off to find Mr. 104, and they transcend into some new life in space with both of their properties, radiation, as I was speculating about earlier, and elements balancing each other out. So did they become a star? I don't know. I know people are actually wondering about that one because I do get it. Like, everyone's got their kind of, somewhat happy ending. And I say somewhat because of freaking Cliff. It was a happy ending, but again, I'm projecting here with my sadness. But the Larry thing, it's like, are they just going to live together forever in space? Did they become a star? Because with the way that scene cut, it kind of went into this bright light, this light bulb or whatever it was, indicating that they almost like did become a star. But I guess if they did, at least they're together. Or even if they didn't become a star in space, they're still together in space. So it's not like Larry is alone. He has finally got to the point in his life, and how he was saying to Rita earlier, he always felt broken, but she didn't view him as that. And now he's found his other half, his love here. He's got Keeg there. So I guess they're just going to go off on space adventures. That's if they're not already parked up somewhere in some galaxy or whatever as their own sun to assist them. As for Rita in the afterlife, she got such a heartwarming reunion with Malcolm, of which we can't forget. After spending a long time in the past, she fell in love with him and he got killed. This is where all the beef with her and Rouge started. So to see Rita one last time, I actually didn't know if we were going to after she said it's totally fine to the Doom Patrol, but seeing her get her happy ending like that was very satisfying to see. And as for Rouge, well, Rouge without Rita to hold her accountable seems as though she's terrified that she could slip back into what she's always hated about herself. But we do see her walk this somewhat razor thin line, as Vic was saying to her in Doom Manor before that, but in a very Rouge way, as she's sticking it to the ant farm by going back in there and just torching it all. So I just picture Rouge, yeah, sure, she might walk that fine line between, oh, am I going to go bad or not? But she's going to do it in a way where she does walk the line in the best way, not going too bad, but still remaining the good version of Rouge, but doing it with style and a bit of chaos. And I'd like to think that after torching the whole of the ant farm, she could then turn it and rebuild it into a place in where, instead of literally labeling metahumans as weapons, she then instead helps guide them, helps them figure out their powers, sets them on like a new path, again, rather than, just disposing of them as weapons in the ant farm like she did a long time ago, to the point of where it's haunted her up until today. But that's just a bit of headcanon stuff from me. And now, as for Cliff, this whole season, he's just been wanting to make it back home to see his grandson and watch him grow up, but could never quite get there because something popped up. Or was it when him and Jane tried to get there, the car broke down, so they just decided to go back home? And that is when we get our next heartbreaking moment, which spells the end of the entire show. And my God, guys, I know it. This one really, really got me. And it hit hard for me because Cliff's story, from when we first saw him take those steps in Doom Manor, it's the very thing that got me into this show. I'm pretty damn sure it all started off with Cliff anyway. So with the show literally closing off on Cliff as well, before it literally hit the credit screen with the power going out in his eyes, let's just say I'm struggling to articulate right now because this was the most recent moment I just saw, having just come from binging it. So when we saw Cliff get in the car with Rory, and obviously Cliff, through that crystal that Immortus gave him, he then just gets these glimpses of the future. Both the beautiful and ugly parts that makes up life. And so we got to see Rory having grown up, going to prom, being a dad, even running out on his kids, his mum getting sick and then losing her. And I'm pretty sure, by the way, the older Rory, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that was Matthew Zuck, the actual actor who plays Larry underneath Larry's bandages. Obviously, Matt Bomer voices Larry, but Matthew Zuck, who's basically there all the time on set as the physical Larry, I am pretty sure that was him. So that was pretty awesome to see that. This moment did subvert my expectations once again in the best kind of way. Now, obviously, in the way I was probably initially thinking about it, it would have been maybe a lot more tackier, because I thought maybe that crystal was going to be, because it looked like a necklace, I thought Isabel Immortus was giving it to Cliff as like a temporary thing to put his Parkinson's to the side, kind of like the Immortus necklace that Chief had, something to just keep him living without worrying. It's kind of what Wally Sage was promising him right before he gave his longevity up. So I thought, okay, well, this is going to be that. But no, it was the gift of seeing Rory grow up, more or less his family's lives unfold, because all while he couldn't be there, it's almost as if like he experiences it with one fat dose. So Cliff goes out feeling very fulfilled, knowing that everything, kind of as Rita says, is fine, is totally fine. And again, just with the way this show hits you with how comedic it is, and yet how much of a blow you take in the feels department. Ultimately, with all of these endings for the Doom Patrol characters, with each character finally getting to where they wanted to be, each character did achieve in the end the life that they've kind of wanted and kind of longed for this entire time, and they can grow more now that they're apart. Well, other than Cliff, but obviously Cliff's journey here was very fulfilling by that final scene, because as he said, it's okay. I made it home. So all in all, guys, I think you can probably tell I had an absolute blast going through all of the final episodes for Doom Patrol Season 4, Part 2. I just think it's been an absolutely fantastic ride, and it's still, to this date, my favorite live-action DC show that has ever been made. And I wholeheartedly mean that. This show, Doom Patrol, from its inception, I think the cast have been amazing. The crew, the writers of this show have just achieved something that I've never seen in live action quite like this. And maybe I'm biased because this is more my kind of like flavor of things, the kind of comedy they have there, the edginess, the jokes, the sentimentality mixed up in all of that. But I think that this show does something so much more than that at the same time. It's not just because, oh, Doom Patrol is hilarious, Cliff says fuck a bunch of times. It's so much deeper than that. Everyone, I think, on some level has related to Doom Patrol, the characters, in some way, shape, or form. We've all come to love these characters and the journey that they've been on, and I'm just so grateful for the absolute blast of a time I've had going on what has been, I guess, the greatest adventure. Not to get too corny there, but a little bit of a My Greatest Adventure reference, but seriously, guys, I think that's more or less everything I've got to ramble about, because my camera literally just overheated because I've been talking so much. So what I will do now is leave it over to you. What did you think of the way Doom Patrol Season 4 wrapped up its final episodes? What did you think of Immortus? What did you think of the way that things ended for each character? Rita, her death, Cliff's death, the way things ended for Vic, obviously Larry, Mr. 104, Jane, where's Dorothy? What's going on with her? I don't know, but I'm guessing she's on her adventure as well. I don't know, guys. I don't really want to end this, but I'm going to have to. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting the channel this entire time throughout the reviews, because it's been a few years now. I do want to apologize once again that it took so long to get my thoughts out there for Season 4 Part 2, but I hope that this gave you a little bit of a fix for those of you who are here to watch this. Maybe tune into one of my live streams that I do on the channel. Make sure you got notifications turned on to make sure you never miss out on a live stream. I'd love to talk about Doom Patrol with you guys there. Ask me any kinds of questions about it. We'll ramble on for ages, or just, you know, let me know some down in the comments. I'll be interacting with you guys about the final episodes on this video. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, Doomies out there, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see all of you Doomies in the next video. Goodbye.